Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. It's a brilliant and special edition where I talk to Jordan Peterson at depth about the impact of Christianity on politics. Everyone's talking about that now. Kamala Harris is making weird gaffes at some of her rallies. Donald Trump is praying. Christianity is, I suppose, back to the forefront of people's minds, even when it comes to political issues. This could be an epochal moment. Let me know in the comments and chat if you agree with that. For the first 15 minutes, we will be streaming on YouTube, Rumble, and Locals. But after that, we'll just be on Rumble and Locals. Our show with Reslan, or whoever we have as our first break bread guest, is going to be deferred to the time displayed below in the lower third now, because we're still trying to confirm it. I'll let you know, we've had some challenges technically, because I'm moving around the world and I'm doing the show using different tech and stuff like that. Things that, frankly, aren't your problem. But we will have solved them by the time you're watching this, and there'll be an episode of Break Bread coming soon, and we'll be streaming tomorrow at the usual time, live, tackling the subjects that matter to you. So for now, we're going to go over to the conversation between me and Jordan Peterson. Let me know what you think. It'll be available on YouTube just for the first few minutes. Then you're going to have to click the link in the description and join us on Rumble. Enjoy it now.
So what's our goal in this conversation?
Our goal in this conversation, Jordan, is to recognize these contradictions. You know, I actually love you. And like when we do stuff, I feel like, oh, this is the plane of reality, intellectual and spiritual reality that I need to live on. In fact, while you were talking out there, I thought, I wonder what would happen if we had to spend 24 hours together. Like, I think it would be very difficult.
Blood and feathers everywhere.
And then, like, you know, I see stuff like online, and why should we care? Why should we care about that culture with the way it treats us and with its obvious malevolent intentions? Yet, I want them to know that we are good. I want them to know that we are good. Here are the areas where they will attack us. Stance on war, any sense of hypocrisy. We've both been publicly attacked. We've both been subject to, I would say, when we first communicated, it was all around ideas around gender. You were kind of ahead of the curve of what would happen, I suppose, with enforced speech and what was coming out of academia and how it would map out onto the culture. I wonder how that relates to my own journey, moving from sort of like an institution like Hollywood, having had allegations made against me. Even now, when you see the Epstein and Diddy stuff, that's clearly not an amplification of individual transparent promiscuity metastasized by allegation and media malign intent. That looks like, actually, because, in the case of Diddy, these are allegations and nothing's been proven. I suppose it's a principle I would like apply to anything said about me. But what one starts to get the sense of through, let's say through Epstein, then it's easier with Epstein, is that there is something dark going on in the culture that's difficult. And this perhaps is a nice thing for us to achieve from the conversation, Jordan. It's increasingly difficult to imagine that the conversation that's defining the run-up to the election, a conversation that appears to be, broadly speaking, globalism versus nationalism, you could make that claim, that it can't just be about matters of dominion. They must be about matters of spirit on some level. Now, prior to us talking, you may have seen the video, perhaps we'll have posted some of it on social media by now, where Jordan and I were discussing that on some level, everything is symbolic. And Doctor, you gave examples from your clinical career of how an elevator could become a sepulchre, that a generalized bravery might be derived from confronting a personal demon. Therefore, archetypally, I ask, what is playing out in this clash of collisions where there is a total bifurcation of narratives, both sides making extraordinary claims about the other, the Trump's detractors claiming him demonic, tyrannical, despotic, the detractors of globalism and those kind of bureaucracies, I suppose that would include both of us, saying that this could be an inflection point where free speech, perpetual war and citizen management accelerate into an unprecedented terrain if the Democrats are successful in this election. So with those two poles, what do you think is ulteriorly playing out? Well, how can we apply the Jordan Peterson of archetypal analysis to this particular clash?
Well, I think probably the simplest way to understand this at the moment is that the fact of universal connectivity and the fact of rate of technological change and information interchange has made the underlying contours of social interaction more starkly clear. So I would say the same thing is happening that's always happened, but way faster,
Yes.
way faster. And so in a way it's clearer, because when something is moving very slow, it might be hard to see that it's moving at all, but things are moving very fast now. And so I think what that means is that we can see things that we couldn't see before, or we can see them more clearly when we kind of had to darkly intuit them before. There's always been an idea that behind the facade, there's an eternal spiritual battle. That's an ancient idea. And it's an idea that's easily deridable and has been, I suppose, since the dawn of the Enlightenment as a superstitious conception of the world. But it doesn't appear to me that it is a superstitious concept at all. It's an indication of the fact that things have a pattern, and there are patterns that are eternal, and eternal patterns play themselves out in the proximal at every moment, even invisibly. Well, it's not so invisible at the moment. And I think this is right. I think it's true.
And also, all that is gross must have had a subtler precedent that all gross matter must have been preceded by some nascent form of itself, a kind of fractal outpouring. Realities aren't just going to sort of blob into reality complete. So the idea that prior to the observable and the discernible, which by definition are that which can be detected sensorially, that there was an existence a priori, or at least before it became observable, is not a ridiculous claim at all. All we're doing is quarreling about the semantics. Was there a creator? Was there a pre-form? Was there an unmanifest? I reckon we could jump between a few disciplines, physics, quantum physics, theology, and find that paradigm somewhat consistent. The alternative would be ridiculous. It's only when we become, like what I've started to observe myself, and it's really helped me reading a Christian apologist whose name is Joseph Boot. He used a brilliant, gosh, there's a lot of Jungian reiteration, rhymes and alliterations in this bit, and even the repetition of an image. He used the famous paragraph, in fact, page that precedes Orwell's much repeated, if you want to envisage the future of humanity, see a boot stamping on the human face forever. The passage before that, the whole page before that, Jordan, is incredible. Man and woman will be separated from one another. Families will be separated. There will be no distinction between beauty and ugliness. Now, I discussed this recently with Tucker Carlson, and he deduced that Orwell, as an Englishman, he believes was not proselytizing about or projecting a dystopian or a further dystopian incarnation of Soviet communism, but he was in fact pondering, projecting, reflecting, imagining what social democracies such as the one he lived in, obviously Britain, might become in time. And I've read some analysis lately that sort of offers us that social democracies will always become tyrannical, and indeed that does seem to be the trajectory. We're not looking, in fact, at 20th century forms of despotism like communism and fascism. What we're seeing is sort of liberalism oddly morphing into tyranny, and we're at the point where all of these bizarre and ironically Orwellian contradictions, like in terms of the use of language, freedom is captivity and all of that, we're watching it happen in actual real time. And just before I conclude, that what I enjoyed when reading the analysis, or at least just the citing of that Orwell passage in Joseph Boot's book, I think it's called Mission of God, was that when you stamp on a human face forever, it's not just the desecration of something beautiful. Whose likeness are we made in? What
Right,
is it
of
you are
course, of
destroying
course,
when
of
you
course.
stamp on the face? And what is the function of totalitarianism? And what is a prerequisite of true totalitarianism? The annihilation of removal of God, because you cannot have true annihilation if the divine principle remains. It's only when you absolutely secularize, materialize, rationalize that human power can, if it indeed is, because remember, I'm asking you if you think there's an occultist undergirding, can fully, because it might be human, we might sort of rational, might become evil at some point in this conversation. They might become synonyms. I wonder, particularly if we are fallen, where did we fall to? So what I sort of sensed, what I understood from that, what was explained to me, was that these totalitarian globalist ideas have as a prerequisite the annihilation of God, so that God's power, God's principles, the unity that's implicit in any sacrament is annihilated. And can therefore be replaced by human power. And now they lay claim to the powers of the God that they have destroyed.
Okay. So let me take that apart. So the first thing I would say is the reason that Cain kills Abel is to attain revenge on God, because Abel is God's favorite. So the proximal target is Cain, but the distal target is definitely God. Okay, so right, I'll show you. That's the motivation of Cain. Cain is rejected by God because his sacrifices are insufficient. We're not exactly sure why. It's not specified in the story. It's intimated that Cain could do better if he chose to, but he decided not to, and he knew it, and he knew what that would result in, and he invited in the temptation to become bitter about it instead of changing in the face of his failure. And he knows that, and he knows that's why he's suffering. And God tells him that, and instead of changing and repenting, even though he's being informed by the divine itself, even though he knows that, he kills Cain. And he does that to spite God. And he triggers off a chain that starts with murder and ends with genocide and the flood. Right. Brutal. Okay, so that's one answer to the propositions you put forward. Another is the story of the Tower of Babel, which is what happens right after the flood. You might say that the world deteriorates in two ways when the divine is offended. And one is chaos floods back, that's the flood. And the other is that alternative conceptions of power emerge. That's the Tower of Babel. So it's the engineers who build the Tower of Babel. It's the descendants of Cain who build the Tower of Babel, fundamentally. The people who are off the divine path, and they build alternative conceptualizations of the divine that are secularized. These Tower of Babel constructions, the ziggurats that are referred to in the text, were towers that were built for the self-aggrandization of secular leaders. So they were testaments to their own deification. Right. And the consequence of that, according to the text, is that if you build a false tower skyward, you will confuse yourself so badly that words themselves will lose all their reference. Right. People will be unable to agree on what constitutes a man and what constitutes a woman. And that is a fundamental disruption, because I believe, as a psychologist, that there is no more fundamental perceptual category, not just conceptual. There's no more fundamental perceptual category than man and woman. Sex is 650 million years old. It's older than trees. The distinction between male and female is more fundamental than the distinction between up and down, or black and white, or dark and light. And so...
Okay, that's all we can show you on YouTube. You're going to have to click the link now if you want to see the rest of this conversation. And it's worth it because, in a sense, in this conversation, I actually learn things about my own understanding of faith and power. And I think when you're watching content like this, what you want is authenticity and integrity, and it's available to you in this conversation because I'm genuinely learning and being surprised by what's happening. So click the link in the description. We're going to be on Rumble right now.